The morning sun painted the dusty main street of Cedar Falls in golden light as Victoria stepped down from the stagecoach, her silk dress catching the attention of every person within sight. She had never seen a town so small, so rough around the edges. Back in Boston, even the poorest neighborhoods had more charm than this entire settlement. But here she was, sent by her father to oversee his newest investment, a struggling ranch that he had bought sight unseen. Victoria brushed the dust from her expensive traveling clothes and looked around with barely concealed disgust. Men in worn boots and faded shirts stopped their conversations to stare at her. Women peeked out from behind curtains, whispering to each other about the fancy lady who had just arrived. Children ran barefoot in the dirt streets, something that would never be allowed in her refined world back east. "Miss Victoria?" A weathered man approached her, removing his hat respectfully. "I'm Henry, the bank manager. Your father sent word you'd be arriving today." She nodded curtly, still taking in the primitive surroundings. "Where is this ranch I'm supposed to evaluate? Please tell me there's somewhere decent to stay in this town." Henry shifted uncomfortably. "Oh, miss, the ranch is about 5 miles west of here. It's for lodging. We've got the boarding house run by Mrs. Patterson. It's clean and respectable, though it might not be what you're used to." Before Victoria could respond, a commotion erupted from the saloon across the street. A tall man in work clothes stumbled out, clearly drunk, followed by angry shouts from inside. He tripped over his own feet and fell face first into the muddy street, causing several onlookers to laugh and shake their heads. "That's Daniel Morrison," Henry said quietly, his voice filled with disappointment. "Used to be one of the finest ranchers in these parts. Now look at him. Lost his wife 2 years back, and he's been drowning his sorrows ever since. Got a little girl at home, too. Poor thing." Victoria watched as Daniel struggled to his feet, mud covering his clothes and face. His dark hair was unkempt, his beard untrimmed, and his eyes held the hollow look of a man who had given up on life. She had never seen anyone look so defeated, so completely broken. "Shameful," she muttered, turning away. A grown man acting like that when he has a child depending on him. As Henry led her toward the boarding house, Victoria couldn't shake the image of the fallen man from her mind. Not because she felt sorry for him, but because she judged him harshly. In her world, people faced their problems with dignity and strength. They didn't fall apart in public, embarrassing themselves and their families. The boarding house was exactly what she expected. Simple. Clean, but lacking any of the luxuries she was accustomed to. Mrs. Patterson, a kind woman in her 50s, showed Victoria to a small room with basic furniture and a single window overlooking the dusty street. "It's not much, dear, but it's the best we have," Mrs. Patterson said apologetically. "Most folks around here don't need fancy accommodations." "It will have to do," Victoria replied stiffly, already planning to make this evaluation as quick as possible so she could return to civilization that evening. Victoria sat in the boarding house's small dining room, picking at a meal of beef stew and fresh bread. The food was actually quite good, much better than she had expected, but she was too focused on her mission to enjoy it properly. Tomorrow, she would ride out to inspect her father's ranch and determine whether it was worth keeping or should be sold immediately. As she ate, she overheard conversations at nearby tables. The townspeople spoke of drought, failing crops, and families struggling to make ends meet. It was a harsh life, so different from the comfortable world she knew. Wondered how people survived in such conditions, how they found any happiness in such a difficult existence. "Poor little Lucy Morrison," she heard one woman whisper to another. "That child barely has enough to eat, and her father spends what little money they have on whiskey. Someone should do something." "What can we do?" the other woman replied. "Daniel won't accept help, and he gets angry if anyone tries to interfere. That man is destroying himself and taking his daughter down with him." Victoria felt a surge of anger toward the man she had seen fall in the street. It was one thing for an adult to make poor choices, but to let a child suffer because of those choices was unforgivable. She had no patience for people who couldn't handle their responsibilities, especially when innocent children were involved. The next morning, Victoria arranged to borrow a horse from the livery stable. She had learned to ride as a child, though it had been more for sport than necessity. The stable owner, an elderly man named Pete, helped her adjust the stirrups and gave her directions to the ranch her father had purchased. "You be careful out there," Miss Pete warned. "That property borders the Morrison place, and Daniel's been known to run off trespassers when he's been drinking. Man's got a terrible temper these days." Victoria assured him she could handle herself, and set off toward the ranch. The ride took her through beautiful countryside that she might have appreciated under different circumstances. Rolling hills covered in grass stretched as far as she could see, broken by stands of oak and pine trees. A clear stream wound through the landscape, reflecting the blue sky above. But Victoria was focused on business. She needed to assess the land, the buildings, and the potential for profit. Her father trusted her judgment, and she intended to give him an honest evaluation based on facts, not emotions. As she approached the property, she could see that it had potential. The land was good, with plenty of water and grass for cattle. The main house was small but solidly built, and there were several outbuildings in decent condition. With proper management and investment, it could become a successful operation. She was examining the fence line when she heard the sound of approaching hoofbeats. Turning, she saw a rider coming toward her at a fast pace. As he got closer, she recognized him as the same man she had seen fall in the street the day before, Daniel Morrison, but this time he wasn't drunk. His eyes were clear and focused, though still filled with the same pain she had noticed before. He pulled his horse to a stop near her and tipped his hat, his manner surprisingly polite despite his rough appearance. "Ma'am," he said in a deep voice, "I don't believe we've met. I'm Daniel Morrison, and this here's my land you're on." Victoria straightened in her saddle, meeting Daniel's gaze with cool confidence. "Actually, Mr. Morrison, you're mistaken. This land belongs to my father, James Wellington of Boston. I'm Victoria Wellington, and I'm here to inspect our new property." Daniel's expression shifted from polite curiosity to something harder. "Wellington bought the old Peterson place? Nobody told me anything about that." He looked around the property with obvious concern. "This land has been in local hands for generations. What's some city man want with a ranch out here? My father makes investments where he sees potential for profit," Victoria replied curtly. "What he does with his property is hardly your concern, Mr. Morrison." Something flickered in Daniel's eyes, anger perhaps, or frustration. "Maybe not directly, but when outsiders come in and change things, it affects everyone in these parts. We've got a way of life here, Miss Wellington, and it doesn't always mix well with city folks' ideas." Victoria felt her temper rising. This man, who couldn't even stay sober enough to care for his own child properly, was lecturing her about responsibility and community. "Mr. Morrison, from what I've observed, perhaps this community could benefit from some new ideas and better management." Comment hit its mark. Daniel's jaw tightened, and his hands clenched the reins of his horse. For a moment, Victoria wondered if she'd gone too far. But then he seemed to gather himself, his voice becoming carefully controlled. "You've been in town one day, Miss Wellington? I don't think that qualifies you to judge how we live or what. I've seen enough to form some opinions," Victoria shot back, thinking of his public display of drunkenness and the gossip about his neglected daughter. An uncomfortable silence stretched between them, broken only by the sound of wind. Rustling through the grass, Victoria could see she had wounded him, but she felt no regret. Someone needed to speak plainly to this man about his responsibilities. "Well," Daniel said finally, "I suppose you'll do what you came here to do. Just remember that actions have consequences out here. City money can't solve every problem." He turned his horse and rode away without another word, leaving Victoria alone to continue her inspection. She tried to focus on evaluating the property, but the encounter had unsettled her more than she cared to admit. There had been something in Daniel's eyes when she'd made her cutting comment, a flash of genuine pain that suggested her words had struck deeper than intended. Pushing the thought aside, Victoria spent the rest of the day examining every aspect of the ranch. The more she saw, the more convinced she became that her father had made a good investment. The land was rich, the water sources reliable, and the location ideal for raising cattle. With proper management, it could generate substantial profits. As the sun began to set, Victoria made her way back toward town. She was tired from the long day of riding and ready for a simple meal and a good night's rest. But as she crested a small hill about a mile from Cedar Falls, she heard something that made her pull her horse to a stop. It was the sound of a child. Crying, not the brief tears of a minor hurt, but the desperate sobbing of someone truly frightened or distressed. Victoria looked around and spotted a small figure sitting by the side of the dirt road. As she rode closer, she could see it was a little girl, maybe 7 or 8 years old, with tangled brown hair and a torn dress. "Hello there," Victoria called gently, dismounting from her horse. "Are you hurt?" The child looked up with red, swollen eyes. She was thin, too thin, and her clothes looked like they hadn't been properly washed in weeks. "Lost," she whispered. "I can't find my papa." Victoria's heart constricted. This had to be Daniel Morrison's daughter, the child she had heard the townspeople discussing with such concern. Up close, the girl's situation was even worse than Victoria had imagined. She was clearly undernourished and neglected. "What's your name, sweetheart?" Victoria asked, kneeling down to the child's level. "Lucy," the girl replied, wiping her nose on her sleeve. "Lucy Morrison. Papa was supposed to pick me up from Mrs. Johnson's house, but he never came. I tried to walk home, but I got all turned." Around Victoria felt a surge of anger toward Daniel. How could a father be so irresponsible? This child had been left alone and frightened, wandering the countryside because her father couldn't be trusted to keep his word. "Don't worry, Lucy," Victoria said softly. "I'll help you get home. Can you tell me which direction your house is?" Lucy pointed vaguely toward the west, but it was clear she had no real idea where she was. Victoria realized she would have to take the child back to town and ask for directions to the Morrison place. She helped Lucy up onto her horse and climbed up behind her, holding the little girl securely as they made their way toward Cedar Falls as they rode. Lucy began to talk, as children often do when they feel safe. She told Victoria about her life, how her mama had died of fever 2 years ago, how her papa was sad all the time now, how she often had to take care of herself because he forgot to come home or fell asleep in his chair. "Papa used to be different," Lucy said sadly. "Before Mama got sick, he would read me stories and teach me to ride and take me fishing at the creek. Now he just sits and drinks the brown stuff that makes him smell funny." Victoria felt her throat tighten. Despite her harsh judgment of Daniel Morrison, hearing his daughter's innocent description of their life made her see the situation from a different perspective. This wasn't just a story of a man failing to meet his responsibilities. It was a story of someone drowning in grief, pulling his child down with him. They reached town just as the last light was fading from the sky. Victoria stopped at the sheriff's office, where a deputy gave her directions to the Morrison ranch. It was only 3 miles out of town, but in the darkness, it would be a difficult ride for someone unfamiliar with the area. "I can take her home." "For you, miss," the deputy offered. "Daniel Morrison's place can be hard to find in the dark." But Victoria found herself shaking her head. "Thank you, but I'll manage. Lucy can show me the way once we get closer." She wasn't sure why she insisted on taking the child home herself. Perhaps it was because Lucy had clung to her so trustingly, or perhaps she felt compelled to confront Daniel Morrison about his neglect of his daughter. Either way, she was committed now. The ride to the Morrison ranch was slow and careful, with Lucy occasionally pointing out landmarks she recognized. As they approached a small, run-down house, with light glowing in one window, Lucy began to tremble. "Is Papa going to be mad at me?" she whispered. "No, sweetheart," Victoria assured her, though she wasn't certain of anything where Daniel Morrison was concerned. "You didn't do anything wrong." But as they drew closer to the house, Victoria could hear shouting coming from inside Daniel's voice, raised in anger or frustration, though she couldn't make out the words. Victoria felt Lucy stiffen in front of her as the angry shouting grew louder. The little girl pressed back against Victoria, trembling with fear. "Maybe we should wait," Lucy whispered. "When Papa sounds like that, it's better to stay away until he calms down." The words broke Victoria's heart. No child should have to be afraid of their own parent, should have to gauge their father's mood before approaching their own home. Victoria's anger toward Daniel Morrison flared even hotter, but she kept her voice gentle for Lucy's sake. "It's going to be all right," Victoria said firmly. "I'm here with you." They dismounted near the front porch, and Victoria could see through the window that Daniel was alone inside, pacing back and forth like a caged animal. Empty bottles sat on a rough wooden table, and papers were scattered across the floor as if he had swept them there in a fit of rage. Victoria knocked firmly on the door. The shouting stopped immediately, followed by the sound of heavy footsteps approaching. When Daniel opened the door, his appearance was even worse than it had been that morning. His clothes were disheveled, his hair wild, and his eyes had the unfocused look of someone who had been drinking heavily. "What are you?" he began angrily, then stopped when he saw Lucy standing beside Victoria. His entire demeanor changed in an instant. The anger drained from his face, replaced by relief and shame. "Lucy, baby, where have you been?" He dropped to his knees and pulled his daughter into his arms, holding her tight. "I've been looking everywhere for you. I was so scared. You forgot to pick me up from Mrs. Johnson's," Lucy said quietly, her small arms wrapping around her father's neck. "I tried to walk home, but I got lost." Victoria watched Daniel's face crumple with guilt and self-loathing. For a moment, she saw past the drunk, irresponsible man to the broken father underneath. But her sympathy was limited. Whatever pain he was carrying, it didn't excuse putting his daughter in danger. "Thank you," Daniel said to Victoria, his voice hoarse with emotion. "Thank you for bringing her home. I don't know what I would have done if you would have kept drinking until you passed out, most likely," Victoria said coldly, "while your daughter wandered the countryside alone in the dark." Daniel flinched as if she had slapped him. Lucy looked between them with confused, frightened eyes. Victoria immediately regretted her harsh words, not because they weren't true, but because the child didn't need to hear them. "Lucy, why don't you go inside and get ready for bed?" Daniel said softly. "I need to talk to Miss Wellington for a minute." Lucy hesitated, looking at Victoria with something like hope in her eyes. "Will you come say goodnight to me?" The innocent request caught Victoria off guard. Yes, of course." After Lucy disappeared inside, Daniel straightened up and faced Victoria. In the lamplight spilling from the house, she could see the full extent of his deterioration. He was thin, his skin had an unhealthy pallor, and his hands shook slightly. Whether from drink or emotion, she couldn't tell. "You're right," he said quietly. "About everything. I forgot to pick her up because I was drowning my sorrows at Murphy's saloon. I promised myself I'd just have one drink after I finished the fence work. But one became two, became five, became five, became..." Ow. He shrugged helplessly. "Your daughter could have been seriously hurt," Victoria said, her voice sharp with anger. "She could have been attacked by wild animals, or fallen and injured herself, or simply wandered until she collapsed from exhaustion. And for what? You could feel sorry for yourself?" Daniel's jaw tightened, and for a moment Victoria thought he might lash out at her. But instead he simply nodded. "You're absolutely right. There's no excuse for what I did tonight. None at all." His quiet acceptance of her criticism somehow made Victoria even angrier. She had expected him to defend himself, to make excuses, to give her a target for her righteous indignation. Instead, his honest acknowledgement of his failures left her feeling oddly deflated. "Then why do you keep doing it?" she asked. "Why do you keep choosing alcohol over your daughter's welfare?" Daniel was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the dark landscape beyond his property. "My wife died 2 years ago," he said finally. "Fever took her in 3 days. Lucy was just 6 years old, asking me why Mama wouldn't wake up, why she couldn't make Mama feel better. I had to watch the light go out of my little girl's eyes when she finally understood that her mother was never coming back." Victoria felt her anger waver slightly, but she forced herself to remain hard. "Many people lose their spouses, Mr. Morrison. They don't all abandon their children to grief." "No," Daniel agreed, "they don't. But maybe they're stronger than I am. Maybe they're better people." He turned to look at her directly. "My wife was everything good in this world, Miss Wellington. She was kind and patient and loving, everything I'm not. She knew how to comfort Lucy when she had nightmares, how to braid her hair properly, how to make her laugh when she was sad. I was just the one who worked the ranch and provided for the family. When Catherine died, I didn't know how to be both parents. I didn't know how to fill the hole she left behind. Victoria found herself moved despite her determination to remain judgmental. She could see the genuine pain in Daniel's eyes, the weight of grief and guilt he carried. But she also thought of Lucy, frightened and alone on that dark road. "So you decided to disappear into a bottle instead of learning?" Victoria asked. "You decided it was easier to abandon your daughter emotionally than to figure out how to be the parent she needed?" "I never meant for it to go this far," Daniel said desperately. "At first I just had a drink or two to help me sleep. Too quiet. The voice in my head that kept telling me I was failing her. But the drinking didn't make anything better. It just made everything worse. Now I can't seem to stop, even when I know I'm hurting Lucy." "Then get help," Victoria said simply. "Stop making excuses and get help." Daniel laughed bitterly. "Help? From who?" "The nearest doctor is 50 miles away. And even if he could do something for a drunk, I don't have money to pay him. Everyone in town has already written me off as hopeless. They cross the street when they see me coming and whisper about what a shame it is that poor little Lucy has such a worthless father. Maybe if you proved them wrong instead of proving them right, they'd be more willing to help," Victoria suggested. Before Daniel could respond, Lucy appeared in the doorway wearing a faded nightgown that was too small for her. "Miss Victoria? Said you'd come say goodnight?" Victoria felt her heart soften as she looked at the little girl. Despite everything she had endured, Lucy still had hope in her eyes, still believed that people would keep their promises to her. Victoria couldn't bear to disappoint that trust. "Of course I did," Victoria said gently. "Lead the way." Lucy's bedroom was small and sparse, with just a narrow bed, a wooden crate that served as a nightstand, and a few toys scattered on the floor. But it was clean, and someone had clearly tried to make it comfortable for a child. Victoria noticed a handmade quilt on the bed, probably sewn by Lucy's mother before she died. "Papa reads to me sometimes," Lucy said as she climbed into bed. "But he falls asleep in the middle, so I don't know how the stories end." Victoria sat on the edge of the bed, her expensive dress a stark contrast to the humble surroundings. "What kind of stories do you like?" "Happy ones," Lucy said simply. "Stories where families stay together and take care of each other." The innocent words hit Victoria like a physical blow. Here was a child who had lost her mother and was slowly losing her father too, still hoping for stories with happy endings. Victoria stayed with Lucy until the little girl fell asleep, gently stroking her tangled hair and humming a lullaby her own mother had sung to her years ago. When she finally emerged from the bedroom, she found Daniel sitting at his kitchen table, his head in his hands. The empty bottles had been cleared away, and he appeared to be fighting to stay sober. "She's asleep," Victoria said quietly, not wanting to wake the child. Daniel looked up and she was surprised to see tears in his eyes. "She used to sleep through the night before Catherine died. Now she has nightmares almost every night. She calls out for her mama, and when I go to comfort her, she just cries harder because I'm not who she wants." Victoria felt her carefully maintained anger begin to crack. She had come here prepared to lecture this man about responsibility. But seeing his genuine anguish over his daughter's pain made her realize the situation was more complicated than she had initially understood. "Children are more resilient than you think," Victoria said, settling into the chair across from him. "Lucy loves you, Mr. Morrison. I can see it in the way she looks at you, even when she's afraid." "I don't deserve her love," Daniel said bitterly. "I've failed her in every way possible. Tonight was just the latest in a long line of disappointments I've caused her." "Then stop disappointing her," Victoria replied firmly. "You can't change what's already happened, but you can change what happens from now on." Daniel looked at her with something like hope flickering in his eyes. "You really think it's possible that I could get better?" "I think you're the only one who can answer that," Victoria said. "But I know your daughter deserves a father who tries, even if he's not perfect." They sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of Lucy's situation hanging between them. Victoria found herself studying Daniel's face, looking past the rough exterior to see the man he might have been before grief broke him down. There was intelligence in his eyes and a gentleness that appeared when he spoke about his daughter. "I should go," Victoria said finally, standing up. "It's getting late, and Lucy needs her rest." "Miss Wellington," Daniel called as she reached the door. "Thank you. Not just for bringing Lucy home, but for being honest with me. Most people just avoid me or talk about me behind my back. You're the first person in 2 years who's told me the truth to my face." Victoria paused with her hand on the door handle. "Mr. Morrison, I may have been honest, but I wasn't entirely fair. I judged you without understanding your circumstances. That doesn't excuse what happened tonight. But I realize now that your situation is more complicated than I initially thought. You were right to judge me," Daniel said quietly. "Someone needed to." Victoria rode back to town through the darkness, her mind churning with conflicting emotions. She had come to Cedar Falls with a simple mission: evaluate her father's property and return to Boston. She hadn't expected to become involved in the messy, complicated lives of the local people, but Lucy's frightened face kept appearing in her mind, along with Daniel's broken confession of his failures as a father. Despite her privileged upbringing, Victoria wasn't heartless. She couldn't simply ignore a child in need, even if that child's father was a drunk who had made terrible choices. The next morning, Victoria woke early and made her way to the general store. She purchased several items: soap, hair ribbons, fabric for a new dress, and food supplies. When the store owner asked if she wanted them delivered somewhere, she gave him the Morrison Ranch address. "You sure about that, miss?" the man asked dubiously. "Daniel Morrison's not exactly reliable when it comes to paying his debts." "I'm paying," Victoria said firmly, "and I want them delivered this morning." Her next stop was the schoolhouse, where she found the teacher, Miss Andrews, preparing lessons for the day. Victoria asked about Lucy Morrison, and Miss Andrews confirmed her suspicions. Lucy attended school sporadically, often arriving hungry and poorly dressed. "It's heartbreaking," Miss Andrews said. "Lucy is a bright child, but it's hard for her to concentrate when she's worried about her father or hasn't had a proper meal. I've tried to help when I can, but there's only so much I can do without overstepping boundaries." Right. "What if someone were willing to ensure Lucy had proper meals and clothing?" Victoria asked. "Would that help her focus on her education?" "Of course it would," Miss Andrews replied. "But who would do such a thing? And would Daniel Morrison allow it? He's very proud, despite his problems. He might see charity as an insult." Victoria spent the rest of the morning thinking about Miss Andrews' words. Pride could be a dangerous thing when a child's welfare was at stake. She needed to find a way to help Lucy without completely destroying Daniel's dignity. That afternoon, Victoria rode back out to the Morrison Ranch. She found Daniel working on his fence line, sober and focused despite the obvious hangover he was nursing. Lucy was nowhere to be seen. "Miss Wellington," Daniel said, looking surprised to see her again. "Is everything all right?" "I came to make you a business proposition," Victoria said, dismounting from her horse. "My father's ranch needs a manager, someone who knows the land and the local conditions. The job would pay enough to support a family comfortably, and it comes with a decent house on the property." Daniel stared at her in confusion. "I don't understand. You made it pretty clear yesterday that you don't think much of my abilities." "I don't think much of your recent choices," Victoria corrected, "but I asked around town this morning. Before your wife died, you had a reputation as one of the best ranchers in the county. Several people told me you built this place from nothing into a successful operation." "That was a long time ago," Daniel said quietly. "I'm not the same man I was then." "No, you're not," Victoria agreed. "But you could be again, if you wanted it badly enough. The question is, do you want to be the father Lucy deserves more than? You want to drown in self-pity?" Daniel was quiet for a long moment, considering her words. What would this job entail exactly? It's managing the day-to-day operations of the ranch? Hiring and supervising workers? Maintaining the buildings and equipment? Overseeing the cattle? All the things you used to do here, but with better pay and resources. And in exchange, you stay sober, Victoria said bluntly. You take care of your daughter properly. You prove that you can be trusted with responsibility again. Daniel looked toward his small house, where Victoria could see Lucy playing in the yard with a cornhusk doll. Why would you do this for us? You don't even know us. I know enough, Victoria replied. I know that child deserves better than she's getting. I know that somewhere underneath the drunk and the grief, there's still a good man who loves his daughter enough to fight for her. What if I fail? Daniel asked. What if I can't stay sober? What if I let you down the same way I've let Lucy down? Then you'll lose the job and the house, and you'll be right back where you started, Victoria said simply. But if you succeed, Lucy gets the father she needs, and my father gets a ranch manager who has every reason to make the operation successful. Daniel was quiet again, weighing her offer. Victoria could see the war playing out in his expression, hope battling against fear, determination struggling against self-doubt. There would be conditions, Victoria continued. You'd have to prove your commitment before we make any permanent arrangements. What kind of conditions? First, you'd work for 30 days without pay to prove you can stay sober and handle the responsibilities, Victoria said, watching Daniel's face carefully. During that time, Lucy would stay with Mrs. Patterson in town during the week and attend school regularly. You could see her on weekends, but only if you've remained sober. Daniel's face darkened. You want to take my daughter away from me? I want to ensure she's safe and properly cared for, while you prove you can be trusted, Victoria replied firmly. Right now, Lucy is afraid to come home some nights because she doesn't know what condition she'll find you in. That's no way for a child to live. I would never hurt Lucy, Daniel protested. Not physically, perhaps. But you're hurting her every day by being unreliable and absent. She found her way to my heart in one evening, Mr. Morrison. Imagine what constant uncertainty is doing to hers. Daniel looked toward his daughter again, and Victoria could see the pain in his eyes as he acknowledged the truth of her words. What happens after 30 days? If you've proven yourself, we'll discuss permanent arrangements. You'd move to the Wellington Ranch with Lucy, manage the operation, and receive a salary that would allow you to provide properly for your daughter. And if I fail, then you go back to this. Victoria gestured toward his run-down property, and Lucy continues to suffer for your choices. The harsh reality of the situation hung between them. Victoria knew she was asking a lot of a man who had been drowning in alcohol and grief for 2 years. But she also knew that sometimes people needed a clear path out of their darkness before they could find the strength to take the first step. Why are you really doing this? Daniel asked after a long silence. You could hire any number of competent ranch managers without taking on the risk of an unreliable drunk. Victoria considered her answer carefully. Because last night I saw a little girl who still believes in happy endings despite everything she's endured. I saw a father who still loves his daughter enough to feel genuine shame about failing her. I think both of you deserve a chance at something better. Daniel walked to his fence and leaned against a post, staring out at his neglected land. Victoria could see him struggling with the decision, weighing his pride against his love for Lucy. I haven't gone a full day without drinking in over a year, he said quietly. I don't know if I can do 30 days, then maybe you should ask yourself if your daughter is worth finding out. Victoria replied. That afternoon, Victoria helped Daniel pack a small bag for Lucy while explaining the arrangement to the little girl. Lucy was confused and frightened about staying in town, but Victoria promised to visit her every day and assured her that her father would see her soon. Is Papa in trouble? Lucy asked as they prepared to leave for town. No, sweetheart, Victoria said gently. Your Papa is trying to get better so he can take better care of you. Sometimes grown-ups need time to learn how to be their best selves. Lucy nodded solemnly, accepting the explanation with the resilience that children often show in difficult situations. She hugged her father goodbye, and Victoria's heart ached. At the hope in the little girl's eyes, "Will come see me soon, Papa?" Lucy asked. "As soon as I can, baby girl," Daniel promised, his voice thick with emotion. The first week was the hardest. Victoria checked on Daniel every day, finding him shaky and sick as his body adjusted to sobriety. He worked despite feeling awful, repairing fences and clearing brush with grim determination. His hands trembled, sweat poured down his face, and sometimes he had to stop to vomit behind the barn, but he kept working. You don't have to push yourself so hard, Victoria told him on the third day, when she found him collapsed in the shade of a tree, exhausted from fighting both his physical withdrawal and the demanding ranch work. Yes, I do, Daniel replied hoarsely. Every minute I waste is another minute Lucy has to wonder if her father is going to get better or if she's going to end up an orphan. Victoria was struck by his honesty and determination. She had expected him to make excuses, to complain about how difficult sobriety was, but instead he focused entirely on his daughter's needs. Meanwhile, Lucy was adjusting to life at the boarding house. Mrs. Patterson doted on her, making sure she had proper meals and clean clothes for school. Victoria visited every afternoon, helping with homework and listening to stories about Lucy's day. The little girl was blossoming under the attention and stability, but she asked about her father constantly. "When can I see Papa?" became Lucy's daily question. "Soon," Victoria would reply. "He's working very hard to get better for you." By the end of the second week, Daniel's physical symptoms had improved, but the mental battle was just beginning. Victoria found him staring at an empty whiskey bottle one evening, his hands shaking not from withdrawal but from the effort of not drinking. "I keep thinking one drink wouldn't hurt," he admitted. "Just one to take the edge off the loneliness." "Then what?" Victoria asked. "One becomes two, two becomes five, and Lucy loses her father all over again." Daniel nodded, setting the bottle aside with visible effort. "I dream about Catherine every night. In the dreams, she's angry with me for what I've done to Lucy. She tells me I'm not the man she married, that she's ashamed of what I've become." "Then prove her wrong," Victoria said simply. "Show her, show Lucy, show yourself that you can be the man you used to be." On Saturday of the second week, Victoria brought Lucy to see her father. The little girl ran into his arms, and Daniel held her tight, tears streaming down his face. "You look better, Papa," Lucy said, touching his clean-shaven cheeks. "You don't smell funny anymore." "I'm trying to be better for you, baby girl," Daniel whispered. "I'm trying so hard." They spent the afternoon together, with Daniel showing Lucy the work he'd been doing around the ranch. She was impressed by the repaired fences, the cleared brush, and the general improvements he'd made in just 2 weeks. "Are you going to keep getting better?" Lucy asked, as Victoria prepared to take her back to town. "I'm going to try my best," Daniel promised. "And next weekend, if I keep doing well, maybe you can stay a little longer." The third week brought new challenges. Daniel had to resist the temptation to celebrate his progress with a drink, and he struggled with the isolation of his new sober life. But he also began to rediscover parts of himself he'd forgotten existed, right? He started reading again, working on plans for improving the ranch, even humming old songs that Catherine used to love. Victoria found herself looking forward to her daily visits more than she cared to admit. She was supposed to be evaluating a business proposition, but somehow it had become much more personal. She enjoyed talking with Daniel about ranch management, about Lucy's progress in school, about their hopes for the future. "You know," Daniel said one evening, as they watched the sunset from his porch, "I haven't thought about drinking today. Not once. That's the first time in 2 years. How does it feel?" Victoria asked. "Scary," Daniel admitted. "Like I might actually be capable of change. And if I'm capable of change, then I have to take responsibility for all the time I wasted, all the pain I caused Lucy." "You can't change the past," Victoria replied, "but you can make sure the future is different." As the fourth week began, Victoria realized she was facing a decision of her own. Her original plan had been to spend a few days evaluating her father's property and return to Boston. Instead, she'd been in Cedar Falls for nearly a month, becoming deeply involved in the lives of people she'd initially planned to dismiss as backward, as country folk. But Cedar Falls had gotten under her skin. She loved the open sky and endless horizons, the sense of community where everyone knew each other, the simple honesty of people who worked hard for everything they had. Most surprisingly, she'd come to care deeply about a broken man who was fighting to rebuild his life, and a little girl who deserved all the love and stability the world could offer. "Miss Victoria," Lucy said one afternoon as they worked on arithmetic together, "are you going to stay with us forever?" The innocent question hit Victoria like a bolt of lightning. Till that moment, she hadn't fully acknowledged how much her feelings had changed, how much she wanted to be part of the life that Daniel and Lucy were building together. "I don't know, sweetheart," Victoria answered honestly. "Would you like me to stay?" "Yes," Lucy said without hesitation. "Papa smiles when you're around. He hasn't smiled much since Mama went away." That evening, Victoria rode out to check on Daniel and found him sitting by Catherine's grave, a simple wooden cross he'd erected behind their house. She hadn't known the grave was there, and seeing Daniel's quiet vigil made her realize how much pain he still carried. "I come here every night," Daniel said without looking up. "I tell her about my day, about Lucy's progress in school, about whether I managed to stay sober. Sometimes I ask her what I should do, how I can be the father Lucy needs." "What do you think she would tell you?" Victoria asked gently. "To keep fighting," Daniel replied. "To not give up on myself or on Lucy. To find a way to be happy again, even though she's gone." He looked up at Victoria with clear, sober eyes. "I think she'd also tell me to stop being afraid of letting someone else care about us." Victoria's heart skipped at Daniel's words, but she kept her voice steady. "What do you mean?" Daniel stood and faced her directly. "I mean that somewhere in these past 4 weeks you stopped being just the rich lady from back east who was helping us out of charity. You became someone Lucy talks about constantly. Someone who makes me want to be a better man, not just for my daughter, but for myself too." "Daniel," Victoria began, but he held up a hand. "Let me finish. Tomorrow marks 30 days since I've had a drink. 30 days since I've failed Lucy as a father. And in those 30 days, you've shown me what it means to put someone else's needs before your own comfort. You didn't have to get involved in our mess, but you did. You didn't have to care about a drunk's daughter, but you do." Victoria felt tears prick her eyes. "Of course I care about Lucy. She's a wonderful child. And what about her father?" Daniel asked quietly, "Do you care about him too?" The question hung between them in the evening air. Victoria had been asking herself the same thing for weeks, fighting against feelings she'd never expected to develop. This wasn't part of her plan. She was supposed to evaluate a property and return to her ordered life in Boston, not fall in love with a recovering drunk and his daughter in the middle of nowhere. But looking at Daniel now, clean, sober, his eyes clear and focused, she couldn't deny what had happened to her heart. "Yes," she whispered. "I care about him very much." Daniel stepped closer, his expression intense. "Victoria, I know I don't have much to offer. I'm a man with a complicated past, a daughter to raise, and a ranch that barely keeps us fed. But I'm sober, I'm willing to work harder than any man you'll ever meet, and I love you." The simple declaration took Victoria's breath away. "You love me?" "I've been falling in love with you since the night you brought Lucy home," Daniel said. "Every day watching you care for my daughter like she was your own, seeing you push me to be better than I thought I could be. How could I not love you?" Victoria felt the last of her defenses crumble. "I love you too," she said, surprised by how easily the words came. "I love your strength, your determination to change for Lucy's sake. I love the way you fought your way back from the darkness. I love the man you're becoming." Daniel reached for her hands, holding them gently. "Then stay. Don't go back to Boston. Help me run your father's ranch. Help me raise Lucy. Let me spend the rest of my life proving that I'm worthy of your love." "It wouldn't be easy," Victoria said, though her heart was already answering for her. "I'm used to a very different kind of life. Servants, fine clothes, social events." "We don't have servants," Daniel agreed, "but we have something better. We have a chance to build something real together, something that matters. Lucy needs a mother, and I need a partner who challenges me to be my best self." Victoria thought about her life in Boston, the endless round of social obligations, pressure to marry someone from her father's circle, the feeling that she was living someone else's idea of what her life should be. Then she thought about Lucy's laughter, about Daniel's quiet strength, about the satisfaction she'd found in helping them build something meaningful. "What would we tell my father?" Victoria asked. "He sent me here to evaluate a business investment, not to fall in love with the ranch manager." Daniel smiled, the first truly happy expression she'd seen from him. "We'll tell him the truth. That his daughter found something in Cedar Falls worth more than all the money in his Boston banks." That night, Victoria rode back to town with her, heart full of hope and fear in equal measure. She had decisions to make, letters to write, a life to completely reshape. But for the first time in years, she felt like she was moving toward something she actually wanted rather than something that was expected of her. The next morning, she woke Lucy early and told her they were going to see her father. "Is today special?" Lucy asked as Victoria helped her into her best dress. "Very special," Victoria replied. Today marks 30 days since your father stopped drinking, and I have something important to ask both of you." They rode out to the ranch together, Lucy chattering excitedly about seeing her father and showing him the new arithmetic skills she'd learned. When they arrived, they found Daniel waiting on the porch, clean-shaven and wearing his best shirt. "Papa." Lucy ran to him and he swept her up in his arms. "Hello, baby girl. How's my smart daughter today?" "Miss Victoria says today is special," Lucy said. "Ah, why is it special?" Daniel looked over Lucy's head at Victoria, his eyes full of love and hope. "It's special because today I can honestly say I'm the father you deserve. And because Miss Victoria has something important to tell us." Victoria took a deep breath. "Lucy, how would you feel if I stayed in Cedar Falls permanently? If I became part of your family?" Lucy's eyes grew wide. "You mean like a mama? That's what you'd like?" Victoria said gently. Lucy launched herself from her father's arms into Victoria's, nearly knocking her over. Yes, I want you to be my mama. I've been wishing for it every night." Daniel approached them, his expression tender. "And I've been wishing for a partner to help me give Lucy the life she deserves." Victoria looked at this man who had fought so hard to overcome his demons, at this little girl who had maintained hope despite so much loss, and knew she was exactly where she belonged. "Then I guess we're going to be a family," she said, tears of joy streaming down her face. 6 months later, Victoria stood in the small church in Cedar Falls, wearing a simple white dress that Mrs. Patterson had helped her sew. Lucy stood beside her as her flower girl, glowing with happiness. Daniel waited at the altar, handsome in a new suit, his eyes never leaving Victoria's face. The congregation was small, but warm. The townspeople, who had initially been suspicious of the rich lady from back east, but had come to respect her dedication to one of their own. Victoria's father had surprised everyone by traveling from Boston for the wedding, declaring that any woman strong enough to help a man overcome his demons was worthy of his respect. "Do you, Victoria, take Daniel to be your husband?" the minister asked. "I do," Victoria said firmly, meaning every word. "Do you, Daniel, take Victoria to be your wife?" "I do," Daniel replied, his voice strong and clear. As they exchanged rings, Lucy clapped her hands with joy. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Daniel's kiss was tender and full of promise for their future together. Later, at the simple reception in the church hall, Victoria's father pulled her aside. "I admit I'm surprised by your choice," he said. "This isn't the life I imagined for you. It's the life I choose for myself," Victoria replied confidently. "And I've never been happier." Her father studied Daniel, who was across the room accepting congratulations from townspeople who had watched his remarkable transformation. "He seems like a good man, a changed man. He's the best man I know," Victoria said. We're going to build something wonderful." As the sun set over the Montana landscape, Victoria danced with her new husband, while Lucy spun around them, laughing with pure joy. She thought about the night she'd arrived in Cedar Falls, looking down on the simple town and its people. She'd been so wrong about what mattered, about what made a life worth living. Now she knew that love wasn't about comfort or status or meeting other people's expectations. Love was about finding someone worth fighting for, about choosing to build something beautiful together even when it wasn't easy. Daniel was no longer just a poor dad struggling with his demons. He was her husband, Lucy's devoted father, and a man who had proven that people could change if they had enough love and determination. And Victoria was no longer just a privileged woman playing at charity. She was a wife, a mother, and a woman who had discovered that the greatest riches came not from what you owned, but from who you chose to love.